Siyathokoza. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good day. Siyabingelela ngenjabulo to everyone that is listening to the sound of our voice. We are rising to share a humanifeminifesto that we have been working on since 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a humanifeminifesto that was developed by two collectives, the Audre Lorde's Love Rebels Feminist Collective and Ikwelo Healers Collective. What informed the humanifeminifesto was an imagination of a feminist and a healing-led government for South Africa, for the African continent, and for the globe. This is work that we have been working on for more than 2 years, and we have done so at the beginning of lockdown through conversations that we have been having via the WhatsApp group platform mostly. And we did also use Facebook and YouTube for sharing some of the conversations and some of the ideas. And what we are sharing today really emanated from that. You are speaking to Dr. Fikile Vilakazi Alberts. Many people know me as Ukoko, Usulumuni Insizoga Shabangu, and others know me just as Fix. And just really sharing on behalf of the Audre Lorde's Love Rebels Feminist Collective and Ikwelo Healers Collective. We are calling this a humanifeminifesto, which is a coming together of our understanding of the elements of humanity, which is the human in the humanifeminifesto, with the elements of feminism, also with the elements of the feminine divinities, which is the component of the feminifesto, in the word that says humanifeminifesto, informed by the values of healing and those of feminism. Our ideological standpoint is really to usher in a feminist and a healer-led government for the 21st century that is embedded in the values of anti-slavery, anti-coloniality, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, anti-capitalist, anti-fascist. Where we are saying that we are anti-slavery, we are advocating for freedom of humanity. When we say we are anti-colonial, we are advocating for sovereignty of states, sovereignty of regions, sovereignty of sub-regions, sovereignty of localities. When we are saying we are anti-racist, we mean that We are for humanity. When we are anti-imperialist, we are for localism, that everything needs to be as local as possible. We are anti-sexist because we believe in an egalitarian society where everybody is equal. Anti-homophobic because we believe in impartiality, regardless of anybody's gender identity, gender presentation, gender expression. We see ourselves as anti-capitalist mainly because we firmly believe in the values of social entrepreneurship that is embedded in the belief that capital needs to serve the social arrangements of society without greed as much as possible. When we are saying we are anti-fascist, we mean that we firmly believe in the principles of self-governance, that individuals, communities, local communities in particular, need to be as self-governing as possible. So in these values, our humanifesto is grounded in the paradigms of humanist, post-colonial, queer, ecological feminism, which informs this framework of governance for a feminist and a healing-led government. So what do we mean by that? We really mean that the systems that have governed us for hundreds of years are not working anymore. Systems of slavery, systems of oppression on the grounds of colonization, systems of oppression on the grounds of apartheid, systems of oppression that we are experiencing in the democratic dispensation. We then have emerged through conversation into a place that says the future is embedded in sociocracy. A feminist and a healing-led future is embedded in an idea that we call sociocracy, which is a whole system approach to governing organizations, to governing societies, that produces greater commitment, distributed leadership, harmonious adaptability, and increased productivity. When people commit to process, when people commit to shared and distributed leadership, that increases productivity. So those are the key elements of a sociocratic society that we believe in. This is a society that has got leaders, and the role of a leader is to communicate the overall plan to the collective. And the leader is not one, leaders are multiple in this sociocratic arrangement. Leaders also delegate to ensure that in the different localities of governance, delegates represent their different localities. And they make sure that the experience of the members in each locality is heard. Everybody's voice matters. And in a sociocratic arrangement, our humanifeminifesto is also embedded then in a system that says, when we lead together, when we delegate each other into experiences of doing, feedback is very, very key in that process. We make sure that the outcome of our decisions as a collective, to find out if we are doing things together, if what we are doing is actually working. A locality or a circle, which is what sociocracy calls it, constantly provides feedback to each other, in a manner that that locality may decide to resolve policies, practices, actions, or extend feedback by involving other localities around it. For example, if you are living in Mkhanyagude community, or you are living in Soweto, or you are living in Sharpeville, the people of Sharpeville in a sociocratic arrangement have a responsibility to lead themselves in Sharpeville, delegate each other in the different responsibilities and functions that they decide need to be a governance structure of Sharpeville, and they would provide feedback into each other. Everybody is a worker, everybody is a decision maker, and everybody provides feedback. And if the people of Sharpeville then decide that we don't have sufficient capacity, we need to probably ask the people of Mkhanyagude, how have they been able to build houses, construct dams, clean up their rivers? Through the feedback cycle, the team agrees to involve the people of Mkhanyagude. So that is a sociocratic process that is embedded in the power of the collective. Decision-making happens in each locality. It has a shared aim and purpose, and is responsible for making decisions about responsibilities within that particular locality and its domain. So you don't have a system that is highly centralized somewhere where you have a huge president elsewhere that governs the whole country. But in a sociocratic arrangement, what we're calling local municipalities at this point, take responsibility for making decisions about what happens in that local municipality, in that local community, within their own domain. How decisions then happen is that ideas are shared, people speak to each other, and they would agree that in this community of Mkhanyagude, we are going to build 100,000 houses. This is how much we are going to charge for solar, for electricity, whatever the decisions are. These are the roads that we're going to build. This is how we're going to take care of our animals. This is how we're going to grow our food, and so on. And there are conversations that are happening that are structured within that local municipality or local area. Decisions then happen through consensus, through consent. Consent in this particular instance is defined as a process where somebody who may be objecting to an idea that is on the table will be able to say, I object on the grounds of A, B, C, and D, which means I do not necessarily agree with what everybody is saying. And for as long as there is someone that objects on the table, a sociocratic process then says a decision has not yet taken place until such time that we have established consent by agreeing that there is no longer an objection on the table on this matter. So this is a method for decision making in a sociocratic system of governance to ensure that everybody then is involved. So our humanifesto is highly then embedded in a sociocracy as a system of governance, which is driven in these ways that we have just described, where there are leaders, number one, and those kinds of leaders, they delegate power and authority to ensure that it is shared. There's constant feedback, thirdly, that is given to everyone so that everybody knows what is happening, how decisions are being made, what are the outcomes of the decisions that have been made, what are the outcomes of the actions that we've decided to take. And the process of how those decisions are made, fourthly, is the process of consent or objection until such time that consent has been established. And those are the four key elements of a sociocratic system of governance. It is highly embedded in the power of the collective. The principles that govern this humanifeminifesto for a feminist and a healing-led government are 5 that we have identified through our conversations between 2020 and 2022. Principle number 1 is that people matter. This is coming from an idea that umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, mutu ki mutu ngabantu. I am because you are. And this is embedded in the philosophical ways of being abantu. In the Pan-Africanist paradigms of humanity and the humanist paradigms of what it means to be human, we live together. So that is the first principle of this humanifesto, this sociocratic framework of governance. The second principle that we have embraced is that in everything that we do, process matters, because life is never an event. Everything is embedded in process. So we need to respect process, because nothing is ever an event. Life is a process. The third P, also highly embedded in the feminist principles and feminist philosophies, that politics is everywhere. It is very, very common within the feminist school of thought that we would say the personal is political. Everything that we do is political. We therefore cannot divorce ourselves from an experience of politics. Politics is everywhere. the personal is political. That is the third principle that governs this humanifeminifesto. In this sociocratic system of governance that is feminist-led, that is led from a healing place. Principle number 4 that we have embraced is that of power. We have agreed that power is everywhere and it must be checked. It must be monitored constantly to do away with centralized oppressive power and to reward collective, decentralized, and shared power. Essentially, then, this humanifeminifesto does not believe in the centralization of power, where power is centralized within one particular individual, where power is centralized within one particular president, where power is centralized within one particular premier, within one particular mayor. Because we believe that power is everywhere and it therefore needs to be centralized. Decentralized and checked and monitored constantly. We obviously then would not necessarily subscribe to ideas of democratic centralism because we see it as a problematic system that saturates power in certain ways within centralized authority. And the last principle of the humanifeminifesto for a feminist and healing-led government is that of partnerships. We firmly believe that partnerships are key. We cannot work in isolation. Partnerships are key because we are interconnected as Batu. We are interconnected as Abantu. Our healing comes from that place of connection. No one is an island. We need each other. We need each other. A sense of community is embedded in our ways of working, in partnership, in interconnectedness. Nothing is ever possible if it is done and run by an individual, if it is individualized. There's a need to always connect to somebody, to something, to someone, to all of us. And that is the last principle. Essentially, then, the humanifeminifesto is embedded in these 5 principles. In summary, people matter. Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, mutu kimutu kabatu. Secondly, process is everything. Process is in everything. Nothing is an event. Life is a process. Thirdly, politics is everywhere. The personal is political. Fourthly, power is everywhere. Everybody has got power. It must be checked. It must be monitored constantly to do away with centralized oppressive power and to reward collective, decentralized, and shared power. Lastly, partnerships are very key because we are interconnected. No one is an island. We all need each other. So we have spoken about the ideological standpoint of this feminist and healer-led government for the 21st century. we have also summarized some of the values that we have developed as part of this humanifeminifesto, our firm belief for freedom, our belief for sovereignty, our belief for humanity, for localism, for egalitarianism, for impartiality, for social entrepreneurship, and for self-governance, embedded in the 5 principles that we have just summarized, run through a sociocratic system of governance that has got leaders who delegate authority, who ensure that there's feedback, and everybody is a leader and everybody is a follower. Decisions are made through consent, objections are enabled, and conversation and contestation is enabled until such time that consent has been established. What we are then saying is that the 21st century is an era that inevitably requires an arrangement that is collective in order to govern. In our view, this is an arrangement that is centered around principles of confederalism, the coming together in a political union of some kind, united for purpose, for a common action. As a confederation. It could be a confederation of states, it could be a confederation of human beings, a confederation of communities who have come together to establish a way of dealing with critical issues. It could be issues of national security, issues of defense, issues of foreign relations in terms of how do we work together if we are living in different countries or different borders, if there are borders, issues of international trade, issues of developing our own community banks, community currencies, food, land, healing, and all of that, And confederalism represents one of the forms of intergovernmentalism. So it is not a centralized system, but it is sharing power through an intergovernmental arrangement of smaller localized spaces of governance, defined as any form of interaction around those particular localized governing spaces that take place on the basis of independence. For example, when you are living in a confederal arrangement, if we take South Africa as an example, you are then saying each and every province is an independent province that will govern itself, will collect its revenues, it will build streets for its people, it will build houses, it will feed its own communities. People are going to be self-governing. Everybody's going to be involved in making sure there's food, there's clean roads, there's clean air, there's clean rivers and oceans, there's jobs, there's work, there's livelihood. We may take it even further to say districts have autonomy and freedom to do the same. where you are even saying that instead of provincializing everything, local districts will collect their own revenues, do their own cleanup, do their own food creation, do their own creation of banks and money and so on. So that is a confederal system. It's not dependent on a national government that makes, that becomes an authority for all states, or for all provinces, or for all districts. So in that way, this humanifesto then presents a confederal system of governance, which is really highly self-governing and is autonomous, and it sends us freedom, and of being really, in freedom of creation and co-creation. And in that process, it does allow interdependence with other localities and other provinces and so on, for sharing experiences, sharing expertise and so on. But it's highly, really self-governing in itself. And that is what we mean by the principle of democratic confederalism as embedded in the sociocratic arrangement of this society that is led from a healing place, and is led from the rising of what we are calling our feminine divinities that are in existence in all of us. Feminine divinities have got nothing to do with our gender. When we are saying this is a feminist and healing-led government, we acknowledge also that all of us have that capability to be feminist. All of us have got that capability to be healers of each other, in our communities, in our families, in our loved ones, and we are essentially that. And the society that is created by this humanifeminifesto, works towards that realization and that consciousness in that place that just reminds us who we are, essentially, that we are feminine divinities that have this capacity to heal each other through this confederal arrangement of sharing power and respecting each other's power. So what we're then saying is, in this humanifesto, is that it becomes a revolution, right? It's a revolution that we are calling a revolution of love and healing, which is highly and deeply centered in an ecological, socio-economic permaculture model. When you have these independent, self-governing localities, they are then operating in terms of now implementation through an eco-socio-economic permaculture model that sends us the values of love. First and foremost, we have to realize that Singabantu, Ribatu, we love each other. We are accountable to each other. Send us accountability, the values of care, which are embedded in also feminist principles of way of being, in the healing principles of being. Honesty, integrity, sharing, respect are embedded in this eco system. And the socio-economic model is that of eco-villages or eco-cities or eco-townships, literally centered around the principles of permaculture, where we see the world view is divided into being social, being economic, being ecological, and being the world. And when we are saying that we are social, we mean that we are building communities and we are embracing diversities of all kinds. As Katie Balalejos, we do not discriminate. We also mean that we are communicators, right? We are constantly building these communication skills and decision-making skills amongst ourselves that are embedded in the sociocratic model that we have described. We are social because we've got leadership, we are empowered, and we are constantly doing this work of leading and empowering each other to continue to lead and to rise and to be independent. But we're also very much and deeply centered in the power of arts, rituals, which are the pillars of our social transformation. As abantu, as Batu, as humans, we are not separated from the world of spirit. We exist because of the power of rituals that we perform, rituals that heal us, rituals that enable us to connect with each other. And some of them are artistic, some of them are spiritual, and some of them are expressive. And those are the rituals and the artistics and the expressions that channel the power of transformation that is constant work of being social. And we're saying we are social in this permaculture ecological model because we are also constantly educating ourselves through social networks, through activism. We are active beings. The word activism means that we are not just sitting down and expecting someone to do something for us. We are active in our own livelihood. We are educating ourselves as we educating others. We are involved in social networks on a daily basis. But we also realize that we cannot just be social without being economic, because our livelihood depends highly on being a multiple of these things. So we are economic because we are shifting the global economy towards sustainability of the local. We are realizing that the local is the most important source of the economic. And we therefore are working towards livelihoods that are embedded in the local. We are building local economies, whether that local is a village, whether it is a rural area, whether it is a township, whether it is a city, but we are building local economies so that we then have the power of the economy revolving in the local sphere. We are building community banks. We are building community currencies. And we are doing this, ethically through proper recognition of law, the rule of law, legally, and dealing with these financial and social issues and ecological issues from the place of the rule of law. So in this ecological, socio-economic model that we are using to implement this humanifeminifesto, we are also saying we are ecological, right? We are building food that is nutritious. Our cycle of food is local. We are growing our own food. We are greening our buildings. We are greening our homes. We are greening our neighborhoods through food and medicines that we grow ourselves. We are investing in infrastructure and in water and in energy, solar power, rivers and oceans, proper infrastructure to make sure that we are ecological, we respect and we live together with animals, with nature, and nature and the urban regeneration therefore become key. Disaster recovery, we are working towards making sure that we are not being disturbed by mudslides, those kinds of things. So we are this whole system that is ecological, where we are caught up in this ecosystem, in this relationship as humans, with animals, with Mother Earth, with nature. And this model then is holistic in that sense, right? That we cannot fragment our social from the economic and from the ecological. We need to find the balance, which then becomes the world. We become that holistic as a world, reconnecting with nature. Transformation for us in this humanifeminifesto, in this feminist and healing-led government, is a constant act of consciousness that brings all these elements into our psyche on a daily basis. So consciousness comes through spirituality, through the power of ritual, through conversation, through networks that are personal, networks that are planetary, networks that are political. So we are deeply in this worldview engaged, socially engaged, spiritually engaged. So a feminist and a healing-led government is then a kind that embraces different forms of spiritualities that are socially engaged. So spirituality is not seen as a separate part of ourselves. Spirituality is seen as informing the economy. Spirituality is seen as informing the ecological. Spirituality is seen as informing the social, and all parts of ourselves become that socially engaged spirituality. Spiritualities in their multiple forms. So essentially then that is what we have embraced in this humanifeminifesto as our ecological, socio-economic permaculture model. Land is at the center of it. We embrace energy. Lastly, then through all this framework with our ideological standpoint and the principles that we have shared, we have arrived at a place that says this humanifeminifesto is led by key pillars, but 7 pillars of governance, which we are calling our 7 pillars of a feminist and healing-led government. Number 1, the first pillar emphasizes localization of economies that are rooted in community banking, community currencies, and community entrepreneurships. Our survival, our livelihood is embedded in localization of economies. Our recovery is embedded in the localization of economies. We are opening community banks. We are developing community currencies, and we are strengthening community entrepreneurships. Practically speaking, everybody goes back home, and we are reworking and reorganizing home to be a place of livelihood. Communities to be places of livelihood. A second pillar is that of provision of land for communal use in community. Land for living so that we have homes, land for planting and land for growing food and medicines, to build happiness and self-reliance as a form of our livelihood. We realize that without land, there is no way that we can actually build self-reliant livelihoods, happy communities. Need land. Land that is communal. Thirdly, we are talking about reparations. We are aware that we are emerging from deeply seated systems of oppression, of slavery, of colonization, of apartheid, and now democracy. So we are very deliberate as a feminist and healing-led government that reparations are very, very important. That is where we begin. Healing will only happen when reparations have happened. And recovery can only happen when we are healed. And all of this needs to happen in community. Repairing ourselves from the past oppressions, from the internalized oppressions, and from the present oppressions. And that's the work of community. We are therefore conscious of our wounds. We are aware that we are in pain, and we are not shy to say that. We are hurting, and we are committed to working through the pain so that we can get into a place of healing. And that is work that is constant. It's a work of consciousness. Pillar number 4 talks about knowledge recovery. We are also aware that knowledge has been stolen in one way or the other. Knowledge has been distorted, and we need to recover knowledge, recreate knowledge, preserve knowledge. And we're talking about knowledge in community, a sense of community, the things that we create and co-create collectively. We are rebuilding our archives, we are rebuilding our libraries, we are collecting our stories, we are sharing our narratives, we are talking about our ancestors and our ancestresses. We are going back to those conversations, and in that doing, we are repackaging the knowledge and recovering it. And pillar number 5 talks about healing. Right? This pillar is committed to saying the work of art is the work of healing. We are saying in this feminist and healing-led government, artists are healers. Artists kidingaka. So we heal ourselves through art, through creation, through expression, through spiritualities that are rooted in community. And number 6, we are rebuilding relationships and families because we are aware that systems of oppression have fragmented our relationships. We need to be deliberate about rebuilding those relationships because they're not going to rebuild themselves without a deliberate process that says we are a fragmented people. We are wounded. We need to rebuild ourselves. And that's what that pillar is about. And lastly, leadership and governance that is rooted in community through self-reliance and rotation. As indicated earlier on, that the sociocracy as a system of governance really works with a leadership system that is rotational in nature, that recognizes that everybody is a leader and everybody is a follower. Rooted largely in community, because we believe everybody has got something to offer and everybody has got something to receive. And essentially, this system of governance emphasizes leadership and governance that is self-reliant through that arrangement of democratic confederalism. And that is the humanifesto that we are bringing to South Africa, to the African continent, to the world. And we are saying, feminist, healer, rise and heal South Africa. Rise and heal the world. Rise and heal yourself. We are rising to heal ourselves and to heal each other. Our slogan says, you glow differently, Balevumile. You glow differently, Balevumile. Thank you very much. This is the humanifesto for a feminist and a healing-led government.